Good evening, and welcome to Truth Report. I'm Alex Truth, and tonight we are covering stories that connect Beijing to Berlin, from space lasers to economic brinkmanship, and a widening military conflict in the Middle East that demands your attention.
I'm Maya Clarity. Tonight's show is packed. China is making moves on multiple fronts, launching breakthrough space laser technology while simultaneously preparing for a Trump visit during its most important political gathering of the year. Europe is fracturing under American pressure. And the situation in Iran has entered a dangerous new phase. Let's get to it.
We start tonight with a story that sounds like science fiction but is very much science fact. According to reporting from the South China Morning Post, Chinese scientists have achieved what they're calling a milestone in space-based laser communications. A team led by the Chinese Academy of Sciences Institute of Optics and Electronics sustained a high-speed laser link with a satellite more than 40,000 kilometers above the Earth. That's geostationary orbit, Maya. That's not low Earth orbit tinkering. That is deep space infrastructure.
And the details matter here. The researchers used a 1.8-meter aperture telescope stationed in Yunnan province to lock onto that geostationary satellite and maintain a stable, hours-long data link. We're talking about sustained, high-bandwidth communication across a distance of 25,000 miles. To put that in perspective, most existing satellite communication relies on radio waves, which are slower, more easily intercepted, and increasingly congested.
This is the critical point. Laser communication, also called optical communication, can carry orders of magnitude more data than traditional radio frequency links. We're talking about the difference between a garden hose and a fire hydrant in terms of data throughput. And the fact that China has demonstrated this at geostationary distance, not just low Earth orbit where companies like SpaceX operate, signals a very different ambition.
Right, because geostationary orbit is the gateway to deep space communication networks. If you want to build a relay system that can reach the Moon, Mars, or beyond, you need stable, high-speed links at these distances. NASA has been working on similar technology. They demonstrated the LCRD, the Laser Communications Relay Demonstration, back in 2021. But China's achievement here appears to push the envelope on sustained link duration and stability.
And let's talk about the strategic implications. Laser communication is inherently more secure than radio. The beam is narrow, point to point. It's extraordinarily difficult to intercept without physically being in the beam path. For military applications, for intelligence transmission, for secure government communications, this is a game changer. China is not just building a faster internet in space. It's building a communication backbone that is resistant to eavesdropping.
The timing is significant too. This announcement comes as the space race between the United States and China intensifies across every domain, from lunar missions to space station construction to satellite constellations. China's Tiangong space station is operational. Their Chang'e lunar program is delivering results. And now this laser communication breakthrough positions them to build the networking infrastructure that ties all of those assets together.
Follow the money and the strategy here. Whoever controls deep space communication infrastructure has a decisive advantage in the next era of space exploration and space-based military operations. This isn't just about scientific prestige. This is about who builds the information highway of the 21st century's second half. And right now, Beijing is laying fiber optic cable in the sky.
The civilian applications are enormous as well. High-speed laser links could revolutionize remote sensing data transmission, enable real-time high-definition Earth observation, and support future crewed missions with the kind of bandwidth that makes video conferencing from Mars theoretically possible. But make no mistake, the dual-use nature of this technology means every defense ministry on Earth is paying very close attention.
And that brings us directly to our next story. Because while Chinese scientists are pushing the boundaries of space technology, Chinese lawmakers are gathering in Beijing for the most politically significant event of the year. The annual two sessions, the combined meetings of the National People's Congress and the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, kicked off this week. And this year's session carries extraordinary weight. According
to the South China Morning Post, the NPC will run for 8 days, and the focus is squarely on economic resilience. NPC spokesman Lu Qingjian outlined the legislative agenda and used the platform to send a very clear message: China will not compromise on core principles in dealing with the United States. That language is deliberate. In Chinese political communication, core principles typically refers to Taiwan, Hong Kong, and territorial sovereignty.
And here's what makes this year's two sessions so unusual. U.S. President Donald Trump is scheduled to visit Beijing just days after the legislative gathering. Think about the choreography here. China's leadership is using the two sessions to set the domestic narrative, to project strength and economic confidence, before sitting down with a president who has built his political brand on being tough on China.
The economic context is critical. China's economy has been navigating significant headwinds, from a prolonged property sector downturn to deflationary pressures to youth unemployment concerns. The two sessions is where Beijing typically announces its GDP growth target, unveils fiscal stimulus measures, and signals policy direction for the year. Every word from Premier Li Cheng's government work report will be parsed by markets from Shanghai to Wall Street.
So the question is, what does Beijing prioritize? Do they announce aggressive stimulus to shore up domestic confidence before Trump arrives? Or do they project fiscal discipline and long-term structural reform? The answer tells us everything about how Xi Jinping's government is reading the current geopolitical moment. My read, based on the signals so far, is that we'll see targeted stimulus aimed at technology self-sufficiency and domestic consumption, paired with hawkish rhetoric on sovereignty.
And the Trump visit adds a wildcard. What is the agenda? Trade, almost certainly. The tariff war between Washington and Beijing has evolved through multiple phases, and Trump has signaled both confrontation and deal-making instincts on China. But there are deeper questions. Does this visit signal a genuine diplomatic thaw, or is it theater designed to project strength for both leaders' domestic audiences?
I think we have to be honest about what's happening here. Both governments are managing narratives for their own populations. Xi needs to show that China can't be pushed around. Trump needs to show he's extracting concessions. The actual substance of any agreement may matter less than the optics. And that's dangerous, because when symbolism drives diplomacy, miscalculation becomes more likely.
The two sessions also matters for another reason. It's when China's defense budget is typically announced. Given the intensifying military competition in the South China Sea, the Taiwan Strait, and now, as we just discussed, in space, any increase in military spending will be read as a direct signal. Last year's official defense budget was around 1.55 trillion yuan. Even modest increases grab headlines.
And let's connect this to the space laser story. When we talk about China's defense modernization, we're not just talking about aircraft carriers and missiles. We're talking about the kind of asymmetric capabilities that laser communication represents. Space-based secure communications, anti-satellite weapons, cyber capabilities. The two sessions is where the political authorization for these programs gets rubber-stamped.
Now let's cross the globe to Europe, where a different kind of fracture is opening up. Spain has publicly accused Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz of failing to show solidarity with Madrid in the face of criticism from U.S. President Donald Trump. According to the South China Morning Post, Spanish Foreign Minister José Manuel Alvarez told broadcaster RTVE that he communicated his surprise over Merz's response, or rather his lack of response, to Trump's verbal attacks on Spain.
Let's set the scene here. During a White House meeting on Tuesday, Trump apparently launched a tirade against Spain. The specific content of those criticisms matters less than what happened next, which was silence from Berlin. And that silence is what Alvarez called out. His quote is pointed. He said, "When you share a currency, a common trade policy and a common market with another country, you expect the same solidarity that Spain showed." That's a direct shot at Merz.
This is about the fundamental cohesion of the European Union. Spain and Germany are both Eurozone members, both EU pillars. When one member state gets publicly attacked by the American president and the most powerful EU economy says nothing, it sends a message. It tells Washington that Europe can be picked off one by one. It tells every EU member that solidarity is conditional. And it tells Brussels that the Franco-German engine that has historically driven European integration may be sputtering.
Friedrich Merz has been Germany's chancellor for a matter of weeks, and he's already facing a defining test of his leadership style. His predecessor, Olaf Scholz, was criticized for being indecisive. Merz appears to be calculating, choosing his battles with Washington carefully. But Spain is arguing that this isn't strategic caution. It's abandonment. And frankly, the Spanish have a point.
The broader pattern here is what should alarm every European citizen. Trump has systematically pressured individual EU nations, whether on trade, defense spending, or political alignment. The strategy is classic divide and conquer. And it works precisely when European leaders prioritize their bilateral relationship with Washington over collective European solidarity. Merz's silence isn't neutral. It's a choice that empowers that strategy.
And let's remember the context. Europe is simultaneously dealing with the ongoing economic consequences of the Ukraine conflict, energy transition challenges, and rising defense costs. NATO burden sharing has been a Trump talking point for years. Germany, as Europe's largest economy, is under particular pressure to increase military spending. Merz may be calculating that staying quiet on Spain buys him goodwill in Washington on defense and trade. But at what cost to European unity?
The cost may be higher than he thinks. If Spain can't count on Germany, can the Baltic states? Can Poland? Can any smaller EU member feel confident that the bloc will stand together when pressured? This incident may seem like a minor diplomatic spat, but it's a stress test of the European project. And right now, the results are not encouraging.
Alvarez was careful in his language, but the subtext was unmistakable. Spain stood with Germany during its own moments of pressure. Spain backed European sanctions regimes, supported collective defense initiatives, and contributed to EU crisis responses. The expectation of reciprocity is foundational to alliances. When that reciprocity fails, trust erodes. And trust, once lost between allies, is extraordinarily difficult to rebuild.
It's also worth noting who benefits from European disunity. Moscow has long sought to fracture EU and NATO consensus. Beijing watches these dynamics closely as it manages its own relationship with Brussels. And Washington, under Trump, appears willing to exploit these fractures rather than shore up alliance cohesion. For European citizens, this should be deeply concerning regardless of political orientation.
Now we turn to the story that may be the most consequential of all tonight. Day 4 of what Consortium News is calling the attack on Iran. And I want to be careful here because this is an evolving military situation with enormous implications, and the information landscape is contested.
What we know from the Consortium News recap of Tuesday's events is that the situation in the Middle East has continued to escalate. Reports indicate that Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps ground forces are being mobilized. Al Jazeera has been providing on-the-ground coverage. And the situation is being described as spiraling, which is the kind of language that should put everyone on high alert.
Let's provide context. Military operations against Iran represent a dramatic escalation from anything we've seen in the region in decades. Iran is not Iraq. Iran is not Libya. It has a population of over 88 million people, a sophisticated military with asymmetric capabilities, and deep strategic alliances across the region, from Hezbollah in Lebanon to militias in Iraq to the Houthis in Yemen. Any military confrontation with Iran has the potential to ignite a regional conflagration.
The human cost is what we need to center here. The civilian population of Iran, people who have no say in their government's policies, are the ones who bear the brunt of military strikes. We've seen this pattern before in Iraq, in Libya, in Syria. The infrastructure that gets destroyed isn't just military. It's water treatment plants, power grids, hospitals, schools. The humanitarian consequences of a sustained military campaign against Iran would be catastrophic.
And the strategic questions are profound. What is the objective? Regime change? Destruction of nuclear facilities? Degradation of military capability? Each of those objectives carries different requirements and different escalation risks. Iran has repeatedly stated that it would respond to military attack by targeting U.S. bases in the region, by activating proxy forces, and potentially by closing the Strait of Hormuz, through which roughly 20% of the world's oil supply transits.
The economic implications alone are staggering. A closure or even a significant disruption of the Strait of Hormuz would send oil prices into a spike that would make the 2022 energy crisis look mild by comparison. Global supply chains, already fragile from years of disruption, would face another massive shock. Every consumer on the planet would feel the impact at the gas pump, at the grocery store, in their heating bills.
We should also talk about the legality and the decision-making process. Under what authority are military operations being conducted? Has Congress authorized the use of military force against Iran? The War Powers Resolution requires the President to consult with Congress and obtain authorization within 60 days of committing forces to hostilities. These aren't academic questions. They go to the heart of democratic accountability for the most consequential decision a government can make, which is the decision to go to war.
And the information environment around this conflict is deeply problematic. Access for independent journalists is limited. Official statements from all parties are shaped by propaganda objectives. Social media is flooded with unverified claims, manipulated footage, and deliberate disinformation. As journalists, we have to be transparent about what we know, what we don't know, and what remains contested. What we can say with confidence is that military operations are underway, that the situation is escalating, and that the consequences are potentially catastrophic.
The IRGC mobilization reported by Al Jazeera is particularly significant. The Revolutionary Guards are not just a military force. They are an economic and political institution deeply embedded in Iranian society. Their mobilization signals that Tehran is preparing not just for defense but for a protracted conflict. Iran has spent decades preparing for exactly this scenario, developing dispersed command structures, hardened facilities, and asymmetric response capabilities.
For our viewers, I want to emphasize something. Regardless of where you stand politically, the decision to engage in military conflict with a nation of nearly 90 million people affects everyone. It affects your economic security, your national security, the lives of service members, and the trajectory of international relations for a generation. This is not a spectator sport. This demands citizen engagement with elected representatives.
Now let's shift to a story that might seem lighter on the surface but actually reveals deep economic currents. More Hongkongers are choosing to leave their money in the mandatory Provident Fund, the city's pension system, rather than withdrawing it. According to the South China Morning Post, the number of people cashing out their MPF because they were leaving Hong Kong permanently fell 39% in the final 3 months of 2025 compared to the previous quarter, down to 4,200 cases.
On its face, this seems like a positive economic signal. Markets rallied, people kept their investments in place, confidence appeared to return. But let's dig deeper. The MPF withdrawal data has become a closely watched proxy for emigration from Hong Kong. After the implementation of the national security law in 2020, there was a significant wave of departures. Teachers, lawyers, journalists, civil society workers. The MPF withdrawal numbers tracked that exodus.
So a decline in withdrawals could mean several things. It could mean fewer people are leaving, which is how the Hong Kong government will spin it. It could mean people who were going to leave have already left. Or, and this is important, it could mean people are leaving but choosing not to withdraw their MPF, perhaps because the market rally made it financially advantageous to leave the money invested, or because the withdrawal process has become more cumbersome.
The stock market rally factor is significant. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index had a strong run in late 2025, driven partly by optimism about Chinese stimulus measures and technology sector performance. If you're sitting on an MPF portfolio that's finally showing gains after years of underperformance, the rational financial decision might be to leave it in place regardless of your emigration plans. You can withdraw later when the timing suits you.
This is why single data points can be misleading without context. The headline, "Fewer people withdrawing pensions," suggests stability. But the underlying dynamics are more complex. Hong Kong's population trends, its labor market composition, the quality of its professional class, these are the metrics that determine the city's long-term competitiveness. And on those measures, the picture is more nuanced than any single quarter of MPF data suggests.
It's also worth noting the broader economic environment. Hong Kong is positioning itself as a bridge between mainland China and international markets, but that bridge role depends on maintaining the legal infrastructure, the financial transparency, and the professional talent pool that made Hong Kong unique. When thousands of experienced professionals leave each quarter, even if the rate is slowing, the cumulative impact on institutional knowledge and professional capacity is real.
And connecting this back to our earlier story on the 2 sessions, Beijing's economic policy decisions directly impact Hong Kong's trajectory. Stimulus measures, regulatory changes, capital market reforms announced during the NPC sessions will shape Hong Kong's economic environment for the year ahead. The MPF data is one small window into a much larger story about confidence in Hong Kong's future under Beijing's governance framework.
The pension fund dimension also highlights something universal. Around the world, ordinary people's retirement security is tied to market performance and political stability. Whether it's MPF in Hong Kong, 401k plans in America, or pension schemes in Europe, working people's futures are held hostage to geopolitical decisions made in capitals far from their kitchen tables. That's a thread that runs through every story we've covered tonight.
Alright, let's pull all of this together, because the connections between tonight's stories are not coincidental. They reveal a global power structure in rapid transformation. China is simultaneously advancing space technology, managing its economy, and preparing for a diplomatic encounter with a confrontational American president. Europe is fracturing under the pressure of American bilateral bullying. A major military conflict is escalating in the Middle East. And ordinary people, from Hong Kong pension holders to European workers to Iranian civilians, are navigating the consequences.
The pattern I see is one of great power competition entering a new and more dangerous phase. The space laser breakthrough is about technological supremacy and secure military communication. The 2 sessions is about economic resilience in the face of decoupling pressures. The Germany-Spain rift is about whether multilateral institutions can hold together when the most powerful player actively works to fragment them. And Iran is about the ultimate expression of power politics, military force.
What concerns me most is the erosion of the guardrails. International institutions, diplomatic norms, alliance solidarity, legal constraints on the use of force, these were never perfect, but they provided friction that slowed escalation and created space for negotiation. What we're seeing in 2026 is those guardrails being dismantled or bypassed across multiple theaters simultaneously.
And the information environment makes it harder for citizens to understand what's happening and hold their governments accountable. When every government controls its narrative, when social media amplifies the loudest voices rather than the most accurate, when journalism itself is under economic and political pressure, the democratic feedback loop that's supposed to check power breaks down.
That's exactly why shows like this one exist. Not to tell you what to think, but to lay out the facts, the connections, and the implications so that you can engage as an informed citizen. The stories we've covered tonight aren't separate events on different continents. They are facets of a single global transformation. And the trajectory of that transformation depends on whether people pay attention and demand accountability.
Whether it's a laser beam connecting Earth to a satellite 40,000 kilometers away, or a pension fund decision in Hong Kong, or a diplomatic silence in Berlin, or bombs falling on Iran, these are all expressions of power. Who has it, how they use it, and who bears the consequences. Our job is to make those power dynamics visible.
So here's what I'd ask of everyone watching tonight. Follow up on these stories. Read the primary sources. When you hear a government claim, ask what evidence supports it. When you see an alliance tested, ask who benefits from the fracture. When military action is taken in your name, ask under what authority and toward what end. That's not cynicism. That's citizenship.
And talk to each other. The most powerful antidote to propaganda and manipulation is informed conversation among citizens who are paying attention. Share what you learn. Challenge what doesn't add up. And never, ever accept the premise that ordinary people can't understand or influence the forces shaping their world. That premise serves power, not people.
Before we go, let's preview what we're watching for in the coming days. The 2 sessions will produce China's economic blueprint for the year. Watch for the GDP target, the defense budget number, and any language on Taiwan. Watch for how the Trump-Beijing visit plays out and whether substance matches spectacle. Watch for whether European leaders find their collective voice or continue to be picked off individually.
On Iran, we'll be watching for any congressional action on war authorization, for humanitarian impact reporting, and for economic ripple effects in energy markets. On Hong Kong, the first quarter 2026 MPF data will tell us whether the trend holds or whether it was a one-quarter anomaly driven by market conditions. And on the space technology front, watch for how NASA and the European Space Agency respond to China's laser communication achievement.
That's our show for tonight. I'm Alex Truth. Do your own research. Verify everything. Trust but verify, and when trust is broken, just verify.
And I'm Maya Clarity. Remember, the truth doesn't need a marketing budget. It just needs people willing to look for it. Good night, and stay informed.